Hello, and welcome to today's History Social Science video lesson. For today's work, you'll need some paper and a pen or pencil. Before we get into that portion of our lesson, I want to start with a little visual inquiry to help get our minds working and our curiosity piqued. I'm going to show you a picture from the past, but I'm not going to let you see the whole picture all at once. Pictures can be great primary sources that help us gain insight into the past. We're going to look at this picture, section by section, and while we do that, I want you to keep 3 questions in mind. What do you see? What might be happening? And what do you wonder about? Here we see the first portion of our picture. What do you see? What might be happening? And what do you wonder about? If I were doing this, I might think, I see trees and what looks like a building. I don't see anything happening yet, and I wonder what's so important about this place. Let's see more of our picture. What do you see? What might be happening? And what do you wonder about? For me, I see more buildings. One looks like it might be a house. That makes me wonder if the first building I saw was a barn. If it is, this could be a farm. Let's reveal another section of the picture. What do you see? What might be happening? And what do you wonder about? For me, I can see more of the foreground, and I see a man, and it looks like he may be working in the field. I wonder, is this his farm? And finally, we can see the whole picture. What do you see? What might be happening? And what do you wonder about? When I look at a picture like this, it gives me a better understanding of the time I'm studying, and it even helps me put myself back in that time. Now, I want you to think of your answer to another question. Would you be willing to move to a foreign country to find work to support your family? Countless numbers of people have struggled with this question throughout history, and many still struggle with it today. Our topic in this video is the Bracero Program, an agreement between the United States and Mexico, begun during World War II, that allowed Mexican laborers to work in the U.S. agricultural industry. Before we begin our overview of the Bracero Program, let's talk about why it's important to learn about. While the Bracero Program was in operation, there were a number of debates surrounding it. For instance, many in the United States argued that the presence of Mexican laborers provided competition to American workers, and this would cause their wages to decrease. Others argued that the participants in the program faced exploitation and poor working conditions. The fact that participants in the program were forbidden from negotiating directly with their employers or going on strike made these problems worse. Still, others believed that the Bracero Program's existence led to many additional Mexican workers entering the United States without legal documents, and that an increase in undocumented immigrants would further harm American workers. Do some of these controversies sound familiar? If they do, that's because many of the challenges we face today are similar to those we've wrestled with in the past. As we learn about the Bracero Program, let's pay particular attention to how people address these challenges in the past, and how we may learn from their successes and their mistakes. In just a couple of minutes, you'll watch a brief video with information about the Bracero Program. As you watch the video, pay attention to the images that you see. How do they make you feel? The Bracero Program took place over 70 years ago, but do the images you see look like something we might see today? We're going to use a double entry journal to record your reactions to the video. To do this, start by taking out a piece of paper. On your paper, make 2 columns. You can do this by folding the paper in half and drawing a line down the crease. On the left side, write down 3 questions that are going to guide your viewing of the video. At the top of the left column, write the first question. What would it be like to be a person who participated in the Bracero Program? Move a third of the way down the column and write the second question. Was the Bracero Program fair to Mexican workers and U.S. workers? Finally, 2/3 down the column, write the third question. How can the history of the Bracero Program help us understand the issues of immigration and citizenship today? As you watch the video, record information you see in the left column under the appropriate guiding question. For example, as you watch the video, you may see an image of laborers working in the field. You can record that information under the first question, as the image helps you understand what it was like to be a person who participated in the Bracero Program. Just record what you see. It can be bullet points or whatever works for you.
Let's begin with a brief overview of the Bracero Program. Between the years of 1942 and 1964, an agreement was established between the American and Mexican governments, which brought millions of Mexican laborers to the United States to work mainly in agriculture. This agreement, known as the Bracero Program, enabled Mexican workers to sign short-term contracts to harvest crops and perform other manual labor jobs in the U.S. Originally, the rationale was to have the Braceros fill the gap left by American workers who were serving in World War II. It's important to note that the Spanish word bracero translates to a person who does manual labor. During this time in history, Mexico was experiencing high unemployment rates and poverty due partly to an extreme drought. While the Braceros experienced challenging living and working conditions in the U.S., many Braceros felt that it was better than having no employment at all in Mexico.
As part of the Bracero Program, millions of workers traveled from all across Mexico to the United States. Their destinations were mainly border states such as California, Arizona, New Mexico, and Texas. These border states had large agricultural industries and a high need for laborers. Before coming to the United States, potential laborers were required to go to reception centers in Mexico. Holding their belongings, they applied for work in the hope of being selected for the journey to the United States. In this photo from 1956, hundreds of potential workers are gathered outside of a reception center in Monterrey, Mexico. In this historic image, braceros walk side by side, forming long lines as they trekked for miles through the hot and arid Mexican landscape to ultimately arrive in the United States. During a 2005 audio interview with Pedro del Real Perez, a former bracero, he said, "Everyone wanted to come here, for good or bad, well treated or poorly treated. Either way, people wanted to come. We needed to come." Before being allowed to cross the border into the United States, the Mexican laborers endured often humiliating medical exams and were sprayed with toxic chemicals in an effort to protect U.S. crops. Here, a large group of approximately 100 braceros is being examined by medical personnel and sprayed with the pesticide DDT. Upon arriving in the U.S., the braceros were transported to locations indicated on their contracts. These locations were mostly farms that needed laborers. The braceros performed back-breaking work known as stoop labor, which involved bending and squatting for many hours. As shown, stoop labor was performed in large fields in order to plant seeds in long rows and harvest various crops. Crops planted and harvested by braceros in California and other western states included cotton, lettuce, tomatoes, grapes, and a variety of other fruits and vegetables. Let's examine this timeline. In 1924, the U.S. Congress passed the Immigration Act, which restricted immigration based on country of origin. In 1941, the U.S. entered World War II. In 1942, an executive order created the Bracero Program based on a diplomatic agreement between the U.S. and Mexico. In 1951, Congress passed Public Law 78, which formalized the Bracero Program. In 1964, the Bracero Program ended. And in 1965, Congress passed the Immigration and Nationality Act, which repealed the Immigration Act of 1924. From the perspective of farm owners, there was a fear that military deployment and new wartime jobs would mean a reduction in the number of available farm laborers. New wartime jobs included assembling B-34 bombers, as depicted here. Farmers were also concerned that they'd need to increase workers' pay drastically in order to attract enough laborers. Students can learn that there was an economic motivation for the Bracero program. For individual braceros, employers did not always honor their contracts. Pay was often lower, hours longer, and conditions more grueling than promised. For example, in this 1957 photo taken in Watsonville, California, several braceros are comparing their paychecks. The stubs were seldom written in Spanish and often did not include itemized deductions. Braceros had limited ability to contest unfair treatment. They were far from home in a country where they did not speak the language and had few legal rights. Their employers, on the other hand, often had considerable power, especially in their local community, given their familiarity with local laws and customs and personal relationships with law enforcement officers and judges. An example of the braceros' living conditions can be found in these photos from a California bracero camp in 1956. Workers endured cramped living quarters, including double-decker canvas beds in a shed-like building and substandard showers that piped in cold water. It is worth noting that American farm workers and Mexican braceros were typically kept separate, which can provide important insight into the program and the general attitudes toward immigrant workers from a social perspective. With this information, students could create a double diary entry showing multiple perspectives of the bracero experience.
Now that you know more about the Bracero program, and have recorded some key details in the left-hand column of your double entry journal, take some time to write down your thoughts about what you saw in the right-hand column. These can be reactions you had, questions the information or images prompted, or connections you've made to events happening today. For example, if you noted an image of workers bent over in the field, you may want to ask the question, did they suffer any long-term problems from working in that position all day? If you want to go further, consider how you might respond to the question, would a program similar to the Bracero program be possible today? If so, what changes might you make to learn from the challenges of the past? Now that you've recorded a lot of information about the Bracero program and thought through your reactions and questions, let's take some time to put ourselves in their shoes. Using the knowledge you've gained, choose a way to adopt the perspective of a laborer in the Bracero program. You can do this by writing a letter home. Many braceros left behind family and loved ones. How would you communicate your experiences to them? Would you be completely honest? Or would you try to focus on the good things so they don't worry? If writing isn't your thing, you could try creating a drawing or other piece of art. As a bracero, you've left your home and your family to come do backbreaking work in a foreign country. How might you process that in a drawing? Would you draw images of your new home or the new people you've met? Or would you tend towards something more abstract and expressive of the emotions you feel? Thank you for watching this video. We hope you enjoyed learning about the Bracero program.